You worked for this. Maybe it was the million. Maybe it was the exit. Maybe it was just getting to a place where you didn't have to hustle so hard anymore. You hit the goal. You got the thing. And for a moment, you felt something. Relief, pride, maybe even a jolt of joy. But it faded, and fast, and what crept in to take its place was silence. Not peace, not rest, just a weird, unsettling quiet. Like walking into a stadium after the game is over. The lights are still on, the stands are empty, and you're just standing there. This moment is where a lot of high performers break. Not publicly, but inwardly. Because no one tells you this part. The finish line, it doesn't feel like the movies. It feels like disorientation. You're supposed to feel proud. You're supposed to feel fulfilled. You're supposed to be grateful. But instead, you feel numb, restless, confused, guilty for not feeling more. And you just don't know who to talk to about it. Because on paper, your life, it's incredible. So you do what high performers do. You try to set a new goal. But the spark's not there. The grind, it doesn't work like it used to. The wins, they don't hit the same. And underneath it all, there's a question forming in the quiet. What now? In the next section, let's talk about why this happens and why people like you are uniquely prone to this kind of crash. All right, here's the trap of conditional identity. Most high performers, they don't build identities. They build conditions for identity. The difference is massive. You didn't just become someone who's successful. You became someone who had to be successful in order to feel like someone. And over time, that becomes the contract. As I'm achieving, as long as that happens, I matter. It's subtle, often unconscious, and it works until it doesn't. The moment the external winds slow down or stop, your internal world, it starts to shake. You're not the builder anymore. You're not the growth guy. You're not the one who always finds a way. So who are you? This is the trap of conditional identity. And it's one of the most brutal emotional shifts that high performers face. Because most of us, we never learned how to separate who we are from what we do well. We got rewarded early and often for output, excellence, and edge. We became elite by attaching worth to performance. But that attachment, it has a cost. And when that game ends, whether it's by choice, exit, burnout, or even success, we find ourselves unmoored. We just don't know how to rest. We don't know how to just be. We don't know how to exist without proving something. That's why so many founders and elite achievers feel lost after hitting those very goals that they once dreamed about. It's not because they failed. It's because they never built a self that could survive without the chase. Okay? Now I want to explore how this ties directly into dopamine, the performance loop, and why breaking it is both terrifying and necessary. So let's talk about dopamine. Let's talk about drive and the crash that follows. Okay? Now, here's some brain chemistry for you, but in plain English. High performers, they're usually high dopamine responders. All right? You're wired for stimulation. You thrive on progress, novelty, and forward motion. You don't just chase goals. You need the chase to feel alive. Dopamine, it's not the pleasure chemical. It's the motivational signal. It's what drives anticipation, excitement, and effort. So when you're building something, a business, a reputation, a breakthrough, the dopamine, it's firing like crazy. every milestone hit, every new level unlocked, every challenge solved, dopamine is going to spike. You're not addicted to the work. You're addicted to the feeling of moving forward. Now, here's the crash that takes place. Once you hit that big goal, the stimulus, it vanishes. There's no new hill to climb. There's no crisis to fix. There's no real resistance. And without those ingredients, your dopamine, it drops. So the very chemical that made you feel alive, it goes quiet. And then your nervous system panics. You feel flat. You feel restless. You might even feel depressed. Not because anything's wrong, but because the chase is gone. And you never really learned how to self-regulate without it. So this is where many, many elite performers fall into destructive loops. Starting something new too quickly. They create drama to feel alive again. They self-sabotage to recreate urgency. And it's not because they're reckless. It's because they're trying to recreate the internal chemistry of drive. And until you understand this loop, you're just going to keep repeating it. So, next, I think we need to talk about why more doesn't work anymore and how to resist that reflex just to set another goal. All right? So here's when more stops working. The first time that it doesn't work, it's disorienting. All right? You think to yourself, I'll just set a bigger goal. New product, new income target, new market. But this time, it feels hollow. You can't fake the fire. And even if you do push through and you hit another win, the satisfaction, it's short-lived. And why? Because you're no longer chasing from desire. You're chasing from avoidance. You are trying to outrun the stillness, the questions, the ache. And deep down, you know, more is not going to fix this. This is the part that nobody teaches high performers. That scaling your business, it doesn't really scale your meaning. That getting richer, it doesn't make you more rooted. That winning more games, it doesn't make the game worth playing. So eventually more becomes noise. It becomes an emotional buffer, a way to keep the truth at bay. You just don't know what matters anymore. You don't know what you want, only what you're good at. You don't know how to rest without guilt. So what do? You fill your calendar. You take on new challenges. You stay busy, not necessarily because you're inspired, but because you're scared of the void. And it works for a time, but the price, it's your aliveness. Because when your nervous system is wired only to feel safe inside intensity, anything slower or quieter feels like death. Let's go deeper into this discomfort, okay? Let's talk about the identity void, the stillness, the ache of having no urgent problem to solve. It's not a flaw. It's a signal. Here's the ache of no problem to solve. We've all been there, okay? Most founders, they live in problem-solving mode. All right? It's the default state. Something's broken. Something is missing. Something's at risk. And when there's a problem, you come alive. You mobilize. You focus. You execute. But what happens when there's nothing urgent to fix? What happens when the fires are out? The numbers are fine, and there's no real resistance. For most high performers, that's not peace, it's ache. An unnameable restlessness. It's a hum of discomfort under the surface. A low-grade panic, masked as boredom. This is the problem. Less void. And it's one of the most dangerous emotional spaces for driven people. Because you don't feel like you unless you're fixing something. So what do? You start creating problems. You overthink. You stir up conflict or urgency. You pick apart your team or brand or even your life. And it's not because you want chaos, but it's because urgency gives you identity. And without that external pressure, you feel adrift. You don't know who you are when things are on fire. You don't know how to feel valuable without proving it. You don't really know how to just be without optimizing it. Here's the truth, guys. If your nervous system, if it only feels safe in survival mode, you will never let yourself feel safe in success. All right? Now we got to talk about how this shows up physically and emotionally, and why so many high performers mistake their nervous system and dysregulation for a lack of purpose. So let's talk about the nervous system, the addiction to intensity. Look, I've been there. This is the part that most mindset and business advice completely misses. It's not just psychological, guys. It's physiological. You're not just addicted to achievement. You are addicted to the state achievement puts you in. That hyper-focus, that urgency, that elevated cortisol dopamine loop where everything feels sharp, fast, and important. For many high performers, that state, it becomes their baseline of safety. And it's not because it feels calm, but it's because it feels familiar. Your nervous system, it gets trained to associate. Chaos equals focus. Stress equals momentum. Urgency equals identity. So when things slow down, even if they're objectively better, you feel anxious. Stillness feels like danger. Ease feels like laziness. Rest feels like losing your edge. This isn't a character flaw. It's a nervous system pattern. And it explains why you sabotage peaceful moments, you start unnecessary projects, you chase high-stakes moves that really don't even excite you much, okay? You're not chasing goals. You're chasing intensity. Because your body, it doesn't know how to relax, at least not without guilt. So here's the real danger. If your nervous system, if it can't handle success, you're going to unconsciously destroy it to return to what feels familiar, which is the fight. This is exactly why healing, it's not just mindset work or journaling. It's really learning how to regulate your system so that stillness doesn't really feel like threat. Because until you do that, no level of success is ever going to feel safe. All right? Now let's shift toward what actually works. Let's begin to explore the first principle of building identity beyond performance. All right? So let's get into it. Self-worth without the scoreboard. Okay? Let's get brutally honest, folks. Most high performers out there, they're used to being measured, right? By grades, by trophies, by revenue, by head count, by followers, right? And somewhere along the way, measured became valued. You didn't just achieve, you became the achievement. The results weren't just proof of success, okay? They were the evidence that you were worthy of existing. It's subtle, it's rarely conscious, but it's everywhere in high-achieving culture. So what exactly happens when the scoreboard goes blank? Well, after the exit, after the promotion, after that thing you built, after it works, you look around, and here's what you realize. You've never really felt enough without the numbers to back it up. This is the crisis that doesn't get posted on social media that often. This is the success hangover that nobody talks about because it's deeply vulnerable to say something like, I have everything I thought I ever wanted, and yet I still don't feel whole. But here's what you guys need to hear. Your worth, it's not a performance, it's not an ROI, it's not a byproduct of how useful, impressive, or optimized you are. It's inherent. But you've spent your entire life training your nervous system to reject that idea because unearned feels dangerous. The path forward, it's not in finding a new scoreboard. It's in learning how to detach your identity from outcomes and reclaim a version of yourself that isn't necessarily tied to achievement loops. You're allowed to matter, even when you're not performing. All right, let's explore the actual concept of emotional sobriety, right? And how reclaiming it can reset your relationship to success, time, and meaning. All right, here's sobriety and relearning aliveness. Okay, aliveness, it's not intensity, and peace isn't numbness. But when your baseline for years has been urgency, performance, and pressure, you lose the ability to feel without adrenaline. That's where emotional sobriety comes in. It's the process of learning to experience your life, not as a project, not as a performance, but as a presence. All right? So here's what that looks like in real time. Feeling boredom without escaping into building something. All right? Sitting in gratitude without necessarily needing to optimize it. Letting joy land without turning it into a lesson. Feeling sadness without immediately turning it into action. This isn't weakness, guys. It's capacity. And for high performers, it's the single most important skill that you were never really taught. Because if you're always reaching for stimulation, if you're always converting, if you're always making emotion into execution, you're never really feeling, you're just managing. And that's what leads to spiritual burnout. You're surrounded by success and completely disconnected from your own inner world. Emotional sobriety, it's the quiet superpower that rebuilds your relationship with time, with rest, and enoughness. It doesn't mean you stop building. It means you're no longer building from fear. The urgency quiets, the pressure softens, the edges round off. And you finally begin to touch something that you haven't in years. A stable, grounded sense of self that doesn't need fixing or growing or proving. That is where real aliveness comes back. It's not from scaling, but from slowing just enough to feel life again. Okay? Finally, let's tie this all together. Okay? We're going to walk through what a post-performance identity can actually look like day by day. Okay? Finally, a new identity after the chase. All right? You've spent a lifetime becoming someone through doing. Now it's time to become someone through being. But this part's hard because it's invisible. No one claps for emotional regulation, okay? Nobody's going to applaud you for spending an hour not checking your metrics. There's no headline for finally felt peace on a Wednesday, right? But this is where the real shift happens. From identity tied to outcome, to identity grounded in presence. You stop chasing relevance. You start embodying enoughness. And that doesn't mean you abandon ambition. It means ambition no longer owns you. You might still run companies. You might still scale offers. You might still create audacious goals. But they will be built on a new foundation. Not to prove that you're valuable, not to avoid stillness, not to escape emptiness, but because they're aligned with who you actually are now, not who you needed to be to survive. This version of you, it's quieter, it's calmer, it's more dangerous in all the right ways. You speak less, but when you do, it lands. You build slower, but what you build endures. You stop optimizing for reach, and you start optimizing for resonance. And the people who matter most, the ones who can actually meet you here, they start to show up in your life and in your business. Because you have stopped performing and you started living. Okay? I know we've been through a lot, but let's close this loop and leave you with the single most important thing to practice that anchors all of this. All right? This is the one quiet ritual that changes everything. Okay? You do not need a 17-step morning routine. You don't need to bother another vision board. You don't even need clarity on your next big thing yet. Here's what you need. At this stage, it's a quiet anchor. Just one ritual that reorients you back to presence every single day. A simple practice that reminds you, I exist outside of what I produce. I matter beyond what I solve. I'm allowed to be, even when I'm not building. For most high performers, that ritual is stillness plus reflection. And it could be as simple as this. 5 minutes, no phone. Sit in a place where you won't be interrupted. Right? Ask yourself out loud, or even in writing, what's alive in me today? What am I trying to outrun? What would I do today if I didn't need to prove anything? And that's it. You're not trying to extract insight. You're not trying to fix anything. You're just being with yourself without a scoreboard. And at first it's going to feel boring and then uncomfortable. And then over time, sacred. Because this is where self-trust gets rebuilt. It's not in the doing, it's in the being. Okay, this one daily moment, repeated over weeks and months, it changes everything. Your nervous system calms, your patterns soften. Your next move, it stops being reactive and it starts being rooted. And that is how you're going to know you're ready for that next chapter. Not because you finally found the next mountain, okay, but because you remembered who you are without the mountain. Thanks for being here, guys, okay? If this resonated, subscribe to the channel, share it with a founder who might be feeling that quiet ache, and maybe you can join the deeper conversation, all right, inside my community. It's called Brand Built. Talk to you guys in the next video.